Really great. Thanks for coming along tonight. I know Petrol is not here at the moment. I feel honoured that you are spending money on petrol to come to see us tonight. So the talk is really good. It's one about the Cork Ancestral project. I want to give a bit of a background on it. So the Irish Genealogical Project, IGP, is a major state-sponsored initiative launched in 1988 under the Department of Ancestral. Its primary goal was to computerise Ireland's genealogical records to support heritage tourism and provide a central resource for the Irish diaspora. The initiative operates through a network of local community-based heritage centres across Ireland. And these centres later formed the Irish Family History Foundation, the IFHF. In 1993, the then Bishop of the Diocese of Cork and Ross, Bishop Michael Murphy, approached the then County Librarian, Ruth Flanagan, with a view to Cork County Library beginning an indexation project which would computerise the parish registers, including baptisms and marriages, for the area known as the Deanery of Cork. And this map that I have up here is the Deanery of Cork. So the area covered extended north to Watergrass Hill, west to Ballincollig, and east to Castle Way. And of course, back in 1994, this is kind of before the start of the World Wide Web. So this is not a great image on the screen, but on my laptop. This is a list of all these various different Irish Family History Foundations, and this list is probably 12 or 15 years old now at this stage. There are various centres around the country at that time. So at that time in 1994, the Irish Family History Foundation had a number of false projects all over the country doing something similar to what the Bishop and County Librarian were hoping to set up in Cork. The Irish Family History Foundation operates as the coordinating body for a network of local county genealogy centres covering most of Ireland. And when I say most of Ireland, those centres are very much, I would say, on the Ruth Ireland website. So when I say most of Ireland, the parts that I'm leaving out of that is not covered by the parish records that are on Irish. There were centres in Limerick, Waterford, Kilkenny and Galway, amongst many more, and the Diocese of Cork and Ross was at that time known as the black spot in terms of the indexation of Irish records. Following a meeting between Bishop Murphy and the County Librarian, an agreement was drawn up whereby the Bishop and the diocesan trustees and the parish priest agreed to making available to the Cork Ancestral Project the parish registers containing the records of baptisms and marriages before the year 1900 at that time. In 1994, the Cork Ancestral Project was established. It was supported by FÁS and sponsored and run by Cork County Library and Act Service. The aim of the course was to computerise parish records for genealogical purposes, as well as providing a means of training for the participants on the course. The course was 6 months in duration initially, eventually increasing to 12 months, but it had continuous intake, which meant that all 12 participants did not begin on the project at the same time. The project had a project coordinator who was employed by Cork County Library and an assistant supervisor and 12 FÁS participants who were paid by FÁS. The project began with the indexation of the parish records of the North Cathedral parish of St. Mary's in St. Anne, which you can see here. The earliest records we computerised were from that parish and date back to 1748. The amount of information in the records can vary enormously, but the standard information in a baptism would be the date of baptism, the name of the child, the parents, the two godparents, and the priest to perform the baptism, and hopefully an address, but as you probably most of you are aware, the addresses tend to come later, so either a street name or town end. In the case of burial records, we computerised approximately 10,000 records for St. Joseph Cemetery on Torrytop Road, which is known as Botanic Gardens. The 10,000 records is a very small amount of records. So those records are indexed and they're available in the County Library, and I'll mention them again later. If you go looking at those indexes and you're looking for somebody in those indexes who you think might have been buried in Torrytop Road,
just because you don't find them in the indexes, that does not mean that they're not there, because as I say, the records that we got were the ones that were in the absolute worst of conditions. We literally got pages that were scrunched up and we had to flatten them out in order to start working on them. So they handed over literally the ones that were in the worst condition to be computerized, because they were the ones that they were kind of felt were most need of being preserved. The participants in the project came from all walks of life, from very different social backgrounds, varying in age from 16 to 65, with a mixture of male and female participants. Younger participants sometimes required time to work out the difference between learning in school and in a training environment. A lot of emphasis was placed on the training of the participants in indexing the parish registers. When the participants first began, I would give them scanned copies with clear handwriting and then give them progressively more difficult handwriting over time. Damaged documents due to the age of the registers, some are over 250 years old, as well as poor handwriting by the priest, are some of the more common problems. Once a participant was on the course about 4 weeks, they began data entering the index cards onto the database. Training in data entry is relatively straightforward and very much on-the-job training. The participants were simply transferring the information on each card onto a screen which contains the same details as the blank card. As I checked all data entry the day after it was entered, it was relatively quick and easy to pick up on any consistent errors. This is just, as I say, the door into our project area where we worked on floor 3 in the County Library building. In addition to the indexation of the parish records, a large function of the project was certification of participants. At the time of the cessation of the project, I was responsible for delivering the following FETAP or QQI level 5 modules. So they were personal effectiveness, work experience, local history studies, clerical skills, processing, spreadsheet methods, presentation skills and technology, and database methods. Actually, the last day that I was working in Cove, I was there about 2 weeks ago working, and I met this gentleman here, the man on the right, and he has written actually a couple of books as a result of being on the project and learning how to actually write essays and write up projects. And he said it would be something he wouldn't have dreamed of doing before he had the experience of working on the project. So these modules consisted of exams, assignments, projects, and work experience, and comprised a large part of the day by the time of the cessation of the project. Being based at Cork County Library and therefore adjacent to the Local Studies Library, facilitated learning in a number of the modules, but in particular the Local History Studies module, as this entailed quite a lot of research and project time. Any of you that are familiar with our staff, there's Richard Forrest on the right, who now works at the City Library, and Kieran Wise there on the right. This is just another picture of the Local Studies Library there, and just some people doing research. So a wide range of training methods were used in the various different modules, such as lectures, tutorials, presentations, demonstrations, exercises and assignments, supervised practice, portfolio development, project work, practical work training, discussion groups and role play, one-to-one supported learning, peer learning, teamwork, giving and receiving feedback. And also participants also had the opportunity to partake in the ECDL, the European Computer Driving License, and they used to do that in the Foss Training Centre in Bishopstown. So they used to go out there one morning a week to do that. So getting back to the process of indexing the records, there were a number of stages to be gone through in order to fulfill our obligations. So the first stage in the indexation process of the parish register entailed acquiring permission from the parish priest of the particular parish. The priest was assured that the Cork Ancestral project adhered to the 100-year rule, thus ensuring for the most part that the information would not be available about people who are still living. And also it was reiterated that the utmost care would be taken of the parish registers with the least possible amount of handling. Once the priest was satisfied that his requirements would be met, the registers were handed over to the project. a receipt was issued to the priest indicating the years covered by each register and also the condition of each register on us receiving it. So this is a list of the various parishes, the year that the registers began, the years they cover, and the number of entries for each parish. So due to the nature of the registers, it was frequently found that some of the pages on the registers were numbered incorrectly by the priest or possibly by the sacristan when the original entries were filled in. So sometimes you might find that they might go to page 98, page 99, page 100, the next thing, page 111 all of a sudden. So that happened quite frequently, that there was gaps. So I'd say it was our job then to go back and just renumber the pages. And that would have been done in pencil, the renumbering. Also at this stage, the volume of entry for each register was counted up. This is a tedious job of counting up every baptism or marriage in the register before you begin working on it. This was especially laborious in the larger registers, which will cover 30 to 40 years. However, it was useful in formulating the percentage of the records which had been transcribed, checked, etc. at any one time, as the number of pages is not always an accurate indicator due to variation in the number of entries per page. Also, about every 2 months, we would have had a meeting. There would have been a heritage consultant would have come down from Dublin, a manager from Foss, the county librarian would all have been present. And usually for that, I would have had to have a report ready indicating of how much of the register had been transcribed, how much had been first checked, how much had been second checked, how much had been validated, data entered, the whole lot. So you could see what progress was being made in each particular register. Care of the registers is of the utmost importance and was a major part of the training. While the registers were being worked on, they were placed on book stands, as you can see here, to ensure protection of the spine, as well as ensuring against unnecessary handling. This is to ensure that the registers are not leaned on unnecessarily, and also for very large registers, it is easier to read the registers when they are at an upright angle rather than flat on a desk. When not in use, the registers were stored in a safe. So this is a work card. So this is the card that we would fill in from the register. You fill in all the information, and you can see there's a comment section down at the bottom. And that comment section was always very handy to put in any notes, or for example, I'll show you examples later where, let's say, a child, you would have come across examples where it showed that child getting married later, and the little note would be written in if they got freedom or whatever, got their permission. You could write in that the child was a twin. If there was something that was unclear, you could make that, you could write in, mother's surname unclear. So that's handy that you do have a comment section, because any of you that use Irish genealogy, you'll notice anything like that, there is no comment section on Irish genealogy, whereas that is there on the Roots Ireland website. And I do think it is very important to be able to put in things. It just means if those comments are in, you always have to go look at the register, and sometimes you will find that extra information there. So the next stage is transcription. The information was transcribed onto printed cards in pencil in block capital letters. Pencil is used for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we were working on original documents, it was imperative that the registers do not get marked with ink, etc. And secondly, because the cards would be checked a number of times, it was necessary to erase any errors and make any changes, and this was obviously more easily done with pencil. Some of the handwriting in the parish registers was relatively straightforward to read, and it could vary to extremely difficult to read. In addition, some of the ink on the pages was very faded, and the longer one worked on a particular register and got familiar with the priest's writing, the easier it became. In some ways, the older registers from the 1700s were almost easier to transcribe, as the script was frequently copperplate and tended to be more uniform and standardized than how we would write today, where we all have our own style of handwriting. So just a few of the training elements that I would have gone through with participants when they began on the project. So one example is in relation to the baptism date or the birth date. So on the left-hand side, you can see there, if 2 dates are given in a register, and that tended to be on the later registers, where the priest would have filled in a birth date and a baptism date, then that was relatively straightforward. You fill in the birth date of the 11th of the 3rd, 1793, and the christening date is the 1st of the 4th, 1793. So that's kind of, I'd say, straightforward. However, on the right-hand side, we have the example if only one date is given, and that would be the christening date. And you'd see that on the earlier registers, only generally the christening date is provided because they are baptism records at the end of the day, they're not birth records. So in that case, what we used to do is basically assume that the birth date and christening date are the same date, and we entered B in the indicator to indicate that that date was based on the baptism. So you can see we have the 13th of the 9th, 1831 for the birth, even though in reality the christening date is the 13th of the 9th, 1831. Generally back then there would have only been a difference of a couple of days probably anyway between a birth and a baptism, but it's better that something is filled in for the birth rather than actually leaving it blank. So just something to be aware of. It may not always be exactly the date that's given if you're thinking that is the birth date. Another element of training that I would have covered is if a day date is not given. So again, you may have come across it in parish registers where you have a date up at the top, the priest would have written August 1865, and then down on the left hand side you may have neglected to fill in the date, so you're literally just, it starts with the child's name. So in that case, where you've just August 1865, we would have entered the date then as NR, which stands for not recorded. So not recorded for the day, the date, and then you just put in 08 1865, and then you put A for approximate in the indicator. And also another example, a similar example to that would be where again you've August 1865 at the top, but this time the date is just worn away. So the priest did put in the date, but now it's actually so illegible because it's on the left hand side of the page and it's been worn away. And in that case, we would actually put in, instead of NR, we would put IL for illegible to indicate that the day date in that case. Or equally, it could be a month is illegible, so you fill it in as appropriate, NR or IL for whatever part of the date is missing, or the whole date could be missing also. In which case you put NR for the 3 sections. Sex, male you enter M, female you entered F, that was straightforward. However, if it is unclear if the child is male or female, and Franz is the kind of obvious example of that, where the priest just wrote FRAN and a little S up high, and then you don't know if it's male or female. So obviously if it's Francis with an I, it's male, Francis with an E, it's female. But if you don't know the sex, if the priest had just written down Franz, then you put in X for the sex of the child. Just a few more examples if a name was unclear. So father, surname, Buckley. So in this case, the example I used to use, there used to be a little blob of ink between the L and the Y in that one. It wasn't clear if there was an E there or not. So you put in Buckley, and then down in the comments, and this is the positive aspect of having the comment section, you can still put down father, surname, unclear, possibly Buckley. And anything that you're taking, it's almost like a quotation, you're taking it directly from the register, you put that in square brackets. Anything outside of square brackets is your own kind of narrative. And then another example, this one where you've got part of the name. So father's surname AHE and 3 dots and an E. So again, could be a blob of ink, it could be just really unclearly written. Irrespective of whether there is one letter you can't make out or there's 5 letters, the standard was you'd always put 3 full stops, no matter how big the gap there for a particular word. So father's surname, AHE, E, and then down in the comments, father's surname unclear. If you wanted to, you could put in possibly a Hearn if you thought that was a possibility. And then this one's surname is Ryan, and then first name, is just illegible. It's where you just couldn't make out the name at all. But obviously, we would try to use illegible as infrequently as possible. The more letters we could work out of a word, obviously, the better. So we kind of always used IL as a last resort. And then, so in the case of a child being born outside of wedlock, the comment illegitimate or otherwise would not be written in the comment section on the card. That was a rule across all the IFHF centres, so I thought there was a form of sanitising the records, but that was what we were told to do. So in this case, 2 cards were created. Both cards are the exact same, except the child takes the father's surname in the first card and the mother's surname in the second card. And the aim of that is that when searching the database, the child could be found irrespective of what name they'd actually taken throughout their lives. Words written on the registers to indicate illegitimate included spurious, bastard, illegitimate, and probably worse as well. But they had no problem writing that down. When I began working on the project first as an assistant supervisor, my boss had worked on Mallow Heritage Centre, and she told me she'd worked on Cove records, and she'd come across one example, and it always sticks with me. The priest wrote down the child had 8 possible fathers, and he listed the names of the 8 possible fathers. Yeah. So that was, I didn't see it myself, but I heard it from somebody who worked on it. So this is an example then of the marriage card when you're filling in the, transcribing it from the register. There's quite a lot in it. Like at the earlier registers, it wouldn't all have been filled up. You wouldn't have had the husband's father's and the husband's mother's names. That tends to be much later. A lot of time occupation wasn't given. So the marriage card, which make your writing quite small to fit it all in. And then this is an example of a burial record of the blank card. So the next stage then in the indexation project is, or in the indexation process, is first check. First checking is the next stage. This entails taking records which have already been transcribed by one person and checking them against the corresponding register to ensure that there are no errors. Any errors which are located are amended on the card. So participants never checked the work that they had already transcribed themselves. Why do you think that is?
Wouldn't even see it.
Exactly. If you saw John, John, the first time, you are going to see John the second time, and it could be Joha, for example, it could be Johanna. So it's always important that a fresh set of eyes is looking at it. And the other thing is as well, when you're checking it, you should always look at the register first, not look at the card. The minute you look at the card, you're going to be swayed by what you see on the card. And again, a lot of the time, working on the project, people would have called me and they'd say, Karen, can you have a look at this? And I said, don't tell me what you think it is, because they'd always want to say, you know, what they think it is. I'm like, don't tell me, because the minute you tell me, that's all I can see. So yeah, that's why it was done that. So participant A may check the work of participant B and perhaps vice versa. Second check. So checking is a form of quality control. The second check was performed by the project coordinator, and this ensured a standard across all the transcribed work. The vast majority of errors should be eliminated at this stage. So this is an example of the data entry baptism screen. So that's what you would have been filling it into. And that's one of the blank one. This is, sorry, now the quality isn't as good up on the screen there. So this is an example of a marriage. And you can see there's addresses filled in on those. And again, you have the comments down at the bottom. ED there is the first thing in the comments, which is then dispensed. And this is an example then of a data entry for a burial. So data entry is the next stage in the indexation process. Here, the information is entered in the index card onto an access-based database called Heritage. The database was created by a company called Tierney Office Automation in Ennis, County Clare, And that same program was used in all IFHF projects across the country to ensure uniformity. Using this type of program rather than Excel made it easier to data enter the information rather than getting distracted by previous lines on the screen from other records. The data entry person was only concentrating on one record at a time and could only see the details of that record on the screen. So first names were standardized at this stage, at data entry stage, to ensure uniformity when accessing records at a later stage. So for example, if a child is called Mag or M-A-R-G-T or Egg, we did not put that would have been written on the card. However, at data entry stage, we would standardize that to Margaret. So if we go back there and look at the marriage, so the husband, it's not very clear now, but you'll see down in the comments we've got husband D-A-V-D, and then you can see he's written in David in full in the main part up at the top, and then we've got wife down in the comments E-L-L-R, so she was Eleanor or Ellen, so you can see the standard then is Ellen. And all of that is about standardizing it to make it easier to extract the information out of it. We're not getting rid of the information, we're still providing you with all the information down in the comments. So we're not getting rid of anything, it's still there. But definitely when it comes to looking for them, it is so much more straightforward when there is a standard name used. So you can see there, this is just a synopsis of the sheet. We're probably about 15 pages, and I would have been adding to it on a continuous basis as you come across new names. So literally, if you come across something, you're kind of going, and especially, I suppose, most of us at our age would have a fair idea of the standard name, but especially the younger one, they wouldn't have a clue, and they'd come across something and go, what? Like Norrie, they used to all be fascinated by Norrie. Norrie is Honora. And they'd go, what? How could can't call somebody Norrie? It would be written down the register. So that was just it was just a handout that was there for them to refer to be able to look up what something would be standardized to. Another example would be Jerem, Darby would all be standardized to Jeremiah. So in addition, many of the registers from the 1700s were in Latin, but this did not create as many issues as one would initially perceive. I don't have any Latin, but I still managed to work away fine. So only first names were in Latin, and once we got familiar with names, it became relatively straightforward to translate to translate and standardize them. So again, you'll see the example there where, and this is actually, if you went into local studies and asked them to print off a record, this is the format that you would actually get it in. So I'm not going to even try, the Latin experts here can tell me how do you pronounce the child's first name down in the comments?
Which one?
William, G-U-L.
It's probably Dylan.
Yeah, in French it would be Guillaume. But any Latin experts here? No, I thought you'd all know. Anyway, I
did right, I forget it.
So you can see if we put Guillaume up here into the child, trying to find that record when you don't know what you're looking for. If you knew you were looking for William, but that's why it's so much straightforward to put William up there. So you can see the child is William up on top, he's Guillaume down the bottom. Father is Joannes. Father is John in the main part. I should be using this, I feel really. So we have Anne, she's here, A-N-N, and down here she's A-N-N-A, and then sponsor one is John, and here he's Joannes, and then SP2, Ellen, we standardized her to, and on the register she was Eleonora. So as I say, I suppose that was probably the most taxing thing you had to do when you were doing the data entry, because data entry was relatively straightforward, but you did have to get into that habit of standardizing all first names. But once you started on it, you got relatively straightforward you know, and you always had your list to refer to. So that was the standardization of first names. There's also standardization of surnames, but it's done in a different way. Validation follows data entry. This was carried out by the project coordinator. This stage ensures that each entry which is entered is checked against the card for any errors which may have occurred at the data entry stage. So the program, as you're data entering every day, I would have to do a printout of the names of the surnames that were rejected by the heritage database. So the program would reject any surnames which had not been previously standardized. So for example, Sweeney or Mac Sweeney or Sweeney, S-W-E-E-N-Y, are data entered for a surname, and all these names will be standardized to Sweeney. Therefore, when searching the database, if an individual seeking information on their ancestors does not know how the family name was spelled in the particular register, it is much simpler to only look up the record using the standard spelling rather than the variations. So just to go back there to that previous screen, you'd see there's a few of them there now. So MacDonald, so you'd see the variant is the one on the left, so this is just MC space Donald. All the standard Macs all become MAC space and whatever it is after that. O'Connor, so you'll see this O'Connor is O apostrophe Connor, and that's standardized to Connor. So any name with an O, O'Riordan, O'Doherty, O'Donovan, would all just become Donovan, Doherty. They don't have the O when we're standardizing it. But again, I don't worry too much about it because it's ease of finding it. In the record, you will still have all the proper information as it was on the register. Humphreys is another one there as well. You can see there the variant is H-U-M-P-H-R-E-Y-S, and then the standard is Humphreys, H-U-M-P-H-R-I-E-S. So we literally, by the time the project was finished, I had a folder that thick of the standardization of surnames, because you would have printed it off maybe once a year so that you had it to refer to. And I had weekly or fortnightly meetings with Tim Cadigan and also with Richard Henshin to discuss their input on less obvious surnames, as they were the experts in the field. And we used to spend, oh my God, hours sitting down going through really awkward, like the ones you're looking at there, they're all very straightforward, but as I said, there were just some that would just crop up, and Tim he could spend a half an hour thinking it out as to what will we standardize this to. So that was probably one of the more challenging parts of the project. The standardization of surnames is vital to the integrity of the database. Chronological printout. So once all the names in the particular register were standardized, the printout was printed in chronological order. As the original register is not always written strictly in date order, the order of the printout can vary from the original register. So I'm sure again you would have come across this when you're looking at any of the online registers, where you could have a priest in January, he puts all his baptisms into the register, and then another priest comes along and he puts in his baptisms, and then the first priest goes on and does February, and then another priest comes along and he puts in January. So it can be a bit all over the place, and you priests in their chunk, different priests in his chunk. So as I say, the printout, the date order printout will not always match up. Ours will be strictly in chronological order, where the original register may not be. So the final check of printout and data updates. Here the index card is compared with the register and the printout, and any final amendments are made on the card and the data updated on the heritage database at this stage. Data updating was quite time consuming, as each entry had to be called up individually through its ID number, and you'll see the ID number is over there on the left hand side. So if I spotted there was a mistake, I'd literally have to get up the number and get it up and make the change to it to fix anything in it. So the final printouts are then printed off, one in chronological order and one in alphabetical order. I actually brought two along with me tonight. You can have a look at them after. And these are the North Cathedral ones. And I brought the black one are baptisms, and the blue one are the marriages. So there's probably about, for the baptism, there's probably maybe 10 or 12 in total. You can see they're Hurley to Linehan, and the marriages are Abbey to Harga. And the marriages I bought, I think, are the husband's ones, but we also have the marriages starting with the wives. But they're available anyway in the local studies library. They're just the North Cathedral ones. But the other parishes that I've mentioned that we've covered, they're all on the database. So if you ever want to go in and ask them to look up records for you, they will do that. So the final printouts are printed off, one in chronological order, one in alphabetical order. The information included in the final printout of a baptism record is the date, the child's first name, the father's first name and surname, the mother's first name and maiden name, and an address if provided. And again, as I said earlier, the address may not always be there in the earlier registers. So if we're looking at this one here from Passage West, we'll see there 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth column down is the address, which has Childtown End at the heading. And you'll see there that probably half of them have the address filled in on them. Sometimes it's down to the particular priest, but by and large, earlier registers just don't have addresses. Due to spatial constraints, details such as the sponsors are not given in these indexes. Because remember, these are only indexes. The full record is available for anything that's there in an index, the proper full record with the comments, with the sponsors' names, they're all available, as I said, to be accessed if you want them. So as I said, any additional information may be accessed in the form of an individual record from the database. These individual records are more detailed and may sometimes provide more information, such as a later marriage for the individual who was baptized. This is a map of St. Joseph's Cemetery, and this is just an example of the printout again. A few Wallaces on that. If you have ancestors in St. Joseph's Cemetery, as I mentioned earlier, what we've done is quite small. If you know the cemetery, going in off of Torrey Top Road, you go in the main gate here, and the cemetery is divided. So over here to the right, I don't know if it's making sense to you now, but any of you know that do know it, hopefully. When you go in, you go over to the right. This is kind of roughly section 1. This is section 2, section 3, section 4, section 5, section 6, and then within the wall section, this is section 7, and this is section 8. So you'll notice there, in that printout over there on the right hand side under location, it tells you the location within the graveyard where the person is buried. But you'll notice from me pointing it out, they're still quite big areas, okay? So it's not narrowing it down. It's not like if you're going to be brought down to, oh, I've got three headstones here and I have to pick out the right one. It's not quite as straightforward as that. So the information provided in the printouts for St. Joseph's Cemetery, which again, the printouts for that are in local studies, so you can go in and just refer to that the same way as you can refer to these ones. So they include the surname, the first name of the deceased, their address at the time of death, if provided. This may be the hospital where they died and not a home address. It could be a street name, or it may give a house number on a street. It varies. So by that, I mean, if you look at the addresses on this, you'll see you've got 2 Bailey Lane, so that's obviously a house. Then we have St. Joachim and Anne's Asylum. Union Hospital, which is obviously St. Finbarr's Hospital. Then you can see you have very exact addresses where you've got numbers, 5 Moriarty's Lane, Cadman Street, Barrack Street, Union Hospital, Beaumont Cottages, Bell and Temple. So you can see Sisters of the Poor is another one there. You can see it varies. Some of those addresses are obviously where they died. Some of them are their home addresses. So, as I say, you could be lucky or unlucky in terms of the information that was just filled in. Also provided was the date of death, the age of death, and the location of where they were buried in the cemetery. Again, this varied from very vague, such as PG. So does anyone know what PG refers to? One moment, does anyone? Who did it last? Who did it last? Say just poor ground. Poor ground is PG. So that's, you will see quite a few of them there. PG, and then you see section 4, north ground. So this one here, S1 so section 1, St. Francis. So that's slightly more detailed, that's giving you a little bit more information, rather than, as you would see most of them, only say the section number. You have 8, section 8, St. Mark, 1, St. Anne. So you're doing very well if you're getting a saint's name in there. It's just narrowing it down that little bit more, maybe to a particular row within the section. So the detail of the information depended on the person who originally filled in the information on the burial register. If you need to find out where in the graveyard the particular location referred to is, the caretaker that I dealt with at the time was very helpful. I believe he's still there, John O'Sullivan. He was always great when I dealt with him, and he is, if he's still there, he's very helpful to telling people if they know, what if they're told it's section 7, he'll point out to you what that relates to. As far as I'm aware, there are no markers indicating the various locations, or at least there wasn't when we were working on the records. So then after all those are printed off, these final printouts were then sent to the binders where they were hardbound. And then finally the original registers, the final printouts, and a CD, or in later time a USB, of all the data were returned to the parish for its use. So in conclusion, examples of locations where individuals found employment on finishing the Cork Ancestral project included the Bull Library in UCC, the Passport Office, Revenue Commissioners, Driving Licence, Department of Social Protection, and credit unions, amongst many more. In addition, people also progressed to do PLC courses as well as arts degrees in UCC and UCG. The project was wound down in 2012. By this stage, the 2 remaining parishes to be completed, St. Peter and Paul's and South Parish, were already uploaded to irishgenealogy.ie. The demands by FÁS of the certification process meant that less and less time was available for the indexation of the records, and more time was required to be spent on the various modules. So you can see the list of parishes that were completed there. Cork City Ancestral Project transcribed and computerised 48 parish registers comprising of baptisms and marriages of over 250,000 records. The records which were indexed by the Cork Ancestral Project are available at the Local Studies Library at Cork County Libraries, and staff will carry out searches, and these are available free of charge. The only thing that the library do charge for literally is the paper that it's printed in. So it's 20 cents to print off a sheet. So if you actually email them, you get it for free, because there's no charge for that. So there is no, as I say, charge. And that was very important when they were setting up the project first day. This is an example of a marriage record. So you can see there, pretty basic. It's from 1832, so kind of what you would expect at the time. Husband's name, wife's name. BA refers to bachelor and spinster. And then you have your 2 witnesses, Nicola Flower and Catherine Walsh. St. Dan's. You'll see no ages provided in the registers, or very, very rarely did I see them anyway. In relation to occupation, Rarely did I see a bride's application provided. If a man's application was provided, it generally related to them being a soldier, and it usually gave their regiment. And this tended to be more common on the two north side parishes, St. Patrick's and the North Cathedral. The fathers of the bride and groom really only started appearing in the pro forma registers, so the registers that were pre-printed for them to fill in, and they kind of start really appearing kind of around the 1870s onwards. But even then, not all parishes had them at that stage, because what I noticed is, let's say if a parish started a register in 1860, there could be 40 years of that to be filled out, and they were not going to get rid of a register just because a nice new printed one is now a thing. They're still going to keep filling out the one that they have, because they were huge, they were massive, they were expensive. So as a result, not all parishes just switched over straight away to pro forma registers. It was just a case of you started the pro forma ones when your current one ran out. Sometimes baptisms can be useful in providing extra information, such as a later marriage of an individual. So again, here we'll see it down in the comment section. So Honora is the child's name, so she was Nora on the original register. And you can see there we've got written down twin to Patrick, and he's entry 183. So 183 means page 183, entry 34. So that's handy to know. And then also Nora O'Donovan married to Patrick O'Sullivan in the cathedral, November 12th, 1957, Reverend R.J. Barrett officiating. And then we also put in the comment, child and father's surname different in reg. So you'll see that the child's name ends with GHU and the father's name ends with GHUE. So we did not everything was just, kind of slapdash, like there was a lot of time and a lot of detail went into making sure that everything was correct. Because you'll actually notice the mother's surname there is TWONY. And people probably look at that and go, oh, they got that wrong. That is definitely Toomey. I know in my heart, I haven't gone back and checked it, but I know that is the way it was written. There's only 2 strokes there. If it was TWONEY, then I would kind of go, oh, maybe I got that wrong. I'd need to go back and check that because there's an extra stroke in there. But, a lot of the time the priest did not always write down things exactly. But you see, we have it standardized to Toomey. And generally as well, if something like that came up, what I would have done is search the database to see, do we have more children of that family, and see, are they Toomeys, and then it then is easier just to standardize the name then as well to Toomey. This is an example from Glencairn. So you'd see in this one we have an address, so we're in 1864, so better at putting in the addresses now at this point. And again, you see the standardization of the first names. Child is M-A-R-G-T down in the comments, and then she's Margaret in full at the top. And again, you'll see the mother is Hurley, H-U-R-L-Y. It's standardized to Hurley with an E. So when the project was established, it was important to Bishop Murphy and the County Librarian Ruth Flanagan that these records would not be behind a paywall, even though that probably wasn't a phrase that was used back in 1994. But they didn't ever want it to be charged for. So in the long term, indexation of all primary source records ensures that the original record will be protected, as there should no longer be a need to refer to the information here, but on the printed hard copy or on a database. There is an alphabetical index of the North Cathedral and St. Joseph's Cemetery records available for consultation in the Local Studies Library at Cork County Library HQ on Carrigrahan Road, next to the County Hall. And as I said, you can email them. The email address is localstudieslibrary@corkcoco.ie. They're always very obliging to look up stuff once you've got some basic information in order to look it up. And let's see, if you want to have a look at these, I'll pass them around. Have a look it up. They're fairly weighty volumes. So that is the baptism. And it's said that's only one of many. I said the marriage is there's just two volumes there of each of them. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for your patience.